You good, Mary? I'll give you the go ahead. Yeah, it's just like, be careful not to pull your blue wire. Oh, that was better. So you'll get it back on.
So that's good. Yeah.
Let's do it. You'll see. Everybody can. Great. Okay. Just give another 30 seconds. If that's good for you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kim Dorman, and I serve as the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Princeton Public Library. I'm so grateful to all of you who are joining us tonight, both in our community room and on the live stream on the library's YouTube channel. Aside from welcoming you here this evening, I want to make sure that everyone is aware that this room is T-Coil enabled. If you have a T-Coil enabled device, you can turn that on now. If you'd like to see what the T-Coil enabled experience is like, we have headsets on top of the piano that you can borrow. The T-Coil enabled system only works if everyone uses the microphone to speak. So anyone who's at the podium is going to be speaking through the microphone. And I ask all audience members to wait for me to bring you the microphone during the Q&A session so that it's just easier for everybody to hear. It is my always great pleasure to collaborate with the wonderful partner, Sustainable Princeton, and that remains true this evening. And it's my delight to introduce Christine Symington, Executive Director of Sustainable Princeton, who will tell you more about this evening's program.
Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you to everyone here this evening. I was just reminiscing with Kim that it's been 4 years since we had a Sustainable Minds event in person at the library. It's really hard to comprehend how long that's been to be back in a room presenting and not being on Zoom. So bear with me if it takes me a little while to get back into the swing of being in front of live people instead of just video, everyone's video on a screen. As Kim mentioned, I'm Christine Symington, the Executive Director at Sustainable Princeton, and I'm joined here this evening with almost all of our teams. So can I have the Sustainable Princeton folks raise their hands? We've got Jenny, Alex, Alana, Madeline. If you're on our board, please raise your hand. We have Betsy, Michael, and Eve. Thank you so much for being here tonight. If you have any questions after the presentation, please find someone from the Sustainable Princeton team and they can help answer your questions. And I do see a lot of familiar faces, but if you could raise your hand if you were involved or around when the Climate Action Plan was developed in 2019. Okay, That's about 2/3 of the room. Raise your hand if you only became aware of it recently, let's say in the past year or so. Okay, so that's like 3 or 4 hands. Okay. When did you hear about it? Did you hear about it when it was advertised for the event tonight? Or let me know how you advertised tonight. I see people raising their hands. Okay, great. So a little bit about Sustainable Princeton, who we are and our role. So we're a nonprofit, and in 2019, we went about putting together a group of community stakeholders and community members to develop the Climate Action Plan, to put together what the goals and the actions were going to be for our community if we want to play a role in reducing our contributions to greenhouse gas emissions and to be better prepared for the impacts of climate change in our community. So what we are presenting tonight is not our work necessarily. It is the result of many individuals putting together their ideas. Our role was to compile it and put it together and to keep tabs on it every year. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands this is not Sustainable Princeton's Climate Action Plan. This is the Princeton community's Climate Action Plan. Okay, a little bit of housekeeping. Virtual participants who are watching via the live stream on YouTube, you can submit questions to our info@sustainableprinceton.org. We have a member of our team who is monitoring that, and when we get to the Q&A, which will be at the end, we'll answer questions that come in through the info@sustainableprinceton.org email address. So, what is a climate action plan? It is simply a plan that sets actions of how we're going to reduce emissions and how we're going to be better prepared for the impacts of climate change. There were more than 50 Princeton community members that served on the steering committee and the working groups. Raise your hand if you were on one of those steering committee or working groups. Yes, thank you. And in the plan, after it was adopted by council in 2019, we put in the plan that we should check in on the progress of how we're doing towards our actions every 3 years, and then in 9 years, in 2028, that we would reconvene community members and look at updating the plan, and knowing that in 2028 things would be different. There would be different information, there'd be different solutions, and that the plan should reflect what the latest understanding is about how we can achieve our emissions reductions and be better prepared for climate change. So I'm going to turn things over to Alex Dill, our program manager, and she's going to walk us through the next set of slides.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see that there's such an interest in our climate action plan. We're going to start off with everybody's favorite, a poll. So if you could take your phones out and you could either text SP505 to 22333 or scan the QR code. The question is, what contributes the most greenhouse gas emissions in Princeton? And those participating virtually could also text SP505 to 22333 or scan the QR code. I'll give everyone like 30 seconds to do so, and then I'll have Alana let me know what all your answers are. Like 10 more seconds. All right, so a big misconception is that transportation is the greatest source of greenhouse gas emissions, but it's actually buildings, and you must all be well informed because majority of you got that right. So our greatest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Princeton comes from our homes and our businesses. And to calculate this, we update our greenhouse gas emission inventory every year. So what is a greenhouse gas inventory? It helps Princeton evaluate and estimate greenhouse gas emissions within the municipality, which also helps Princeton understand the greenhouse gas emissions profile and the sectors driving those emissions. It provides a baseline for tracking emission trends, and then it also helps inform our climate action plan. To create this greenhouse gas inventory, Princeton follows a protocol by ICLEI. If you're interested in the data further, we have the original climate action plan at the back of the room, or you could come up and ask me questions after. So we total up the emissions from every year. Here you could see from 2018 when we first developed the CAP to 2022. I want to note here this dip in 2020. So you could see that is because of COVID. Just because though that there was less emissions in Princeton doesn't mean that's for everywhere. So the emissions could be allocated differently because people switched from working in offices to at home, so it could be spread in different areas. It's also important to note about 2020 is that we don't want to rebound back to where we were then. We, just for the sake of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, we want to try and make consistent lifestyle and habit changes that will let us maintain our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, which are what this chart shows. So these goals are for Princeton to reduce community-wide carbon emissions, 50% by 2030, 65% by 2040, and 80% by 2050. And we believe that taking all of the actions in this plan will be able to get us there. So now we're going to be going over some progress highlights in all of the different action areas in our plan. So there's 5 different categories in the climate action plan: energy, land use and transportation, natural resources, material management, and resiliency. There's 13 objectives within that, and then 85 actions within that. I won't be going over all those today, so sit here for a minute. So first, in the energy category, this envisions all Princeton community members efficiently using clean, reliable, and affordable energy. Our first status update is going to be in accelerating residential and commercial participation in state utility energy efficiency programs. So as you can see here, 493 residents have participated in residential programs and 57 businesses have participated in the commercial programs. Princeton is actually just started with Sustainable Jersey and PSE&G an outreach campaign to increase these numbers. And if you want to find out more information, we have more information in the back. Action that we have completed is the building benchmarking action. So this requirement actually came from NJBPU. It states that commercial buildings over 25,000 square feet are required to benchmark their energy and water usage. To help with this requirement, Sustainable Princeton held a webinar for all the covered buildings so that they could ask BPU any questions. An ongoing project we're working on is community solar. Can I get a raise of hands for who's subscribed to a community solar project? Okay, awesome. What about, does anybody raise your hand if you know what community solar is? Okay. Oh, okay, most of you. Well, if you don't know, community solar is a large solar installation with multiple subscribers. It provides benefits of solar to those who aren't able to install it. So renters, people with shade, someone who maybe not be able to afford the upfront cost of solar. And then each subscriber receives a 5 to 21% bill credit. There are projects in New Jersey, and you can find them on the New Jersey Community Solar Project Finder. They just have to be in PSE&G territory. We do continual outreach about this, and there is limited space. I know there's a few people who are still on the waiting list, but you could also ask for more information. Now, if you are able to install solar, you're one of the 313 registered solar installations in Princeton. Can I get a raise of hands? Anybody has solar? Okay, nice. A raise of hands for anybody interested in solar. Okay, nice. So you guys can all come to the Sustainable Home Expo on March 9th. We'll have educational sessions on rooftop solar, and you can talk to solar professionals there. Last update is the Princeton Renewable Government Energy Aggregation Program. Some of you may know it as Princeton Community Renewable Energy, or PCRE. This program provided electricity supply to residents at lower prices offered than PSE&G, with higher renewable energy content and with no change to the level of service. It did end in December of 2021, but we are reevaluating and waiting for the markets to become more favorable. And looking ahead, our community will continue to reduce emissions in the built environment and increase the supply of low carbon, affordable, reliable energy. I'm now going to pass it back over to Christine.
Thank you, Alex. So Alex is our program manager that oversees our programs related to energy efficiency, renewable energy, and sustainable transportation. And she joined our team back in July, and we will be seeing more of her. Okay, the second section of the Climate Action Plan includes actions that will help us reduce emissions related to land use and transportation. And when Sustainable Princeton started doing research as to what components does a community climate action plan include, and I looked at climate action plans of cities and towns just like Princeton across the United States, every single one of them had a section about land use and transportation. And at the time, I did not quite understand myself what the relationship between how we manage, how we build and where we build, what that has to do with the community's emissions. And it's been a little bit of a learning process for me, and it might be for others, to make the connection between land use, transportation, and climate change. But it is an enormous connection. The vision of the land use and transportation actions are that all Princeton community members have access to safe, affordable, low-carbon housing and transportation. There are 3 objectives in this section. The first objective, and they're numbered based on where they are in the plan, not within each section. So objective 3 is to promote mixed-use development in pedestrian and transit-oriented location-efficient neighborhoods, which is a mouthful. To reduce community-wide vehicle miles traveled by switching to public transit, bicycling, and walking, and then expand access to zero-emission vehicles. So how are we going to achieve location-efficient, transit-oriented development? That is by following smart growth principles. And that is by locating where we live and work and play in areas that are compact and easily accessed by biking and walking and accessing through public transportation. This is an image that I think is also very helpful in understanding what the transit hierarchy is. If we want to, as a community, manage our emissions as we grow, then we should build things in a way where it makes it easier to get from point A to point B in a way that prioritizes walking, cycling, public transit, using taxis, ride hailing, car sharing, and then lastly by using a car. This is a chart that was helpful for me to understand just what the impact can be in terms of emissions if we follow smart growth principles. If we follow the conventional suburban development of a single family detached type of development versus multifamily, which is near transit, we get that smallest bar chart there, and we get even further reductions or more efficiencies in our emissions if those buildings and the way we get around are buildings that are built to high green building standards, energy efficiency standards, that make use of less resources, and if the way we get about is using zero or low emission modes of transportation. So that just can kind of show you like the scale, how we build, where we build, and how we get from point A to point B has a significant impact on what our emissions will be. So some progress that has been made in the town, and I said this in the beginning, but I want to make sure we say this periodically throughout, even though we are the ones speaking and I am the one speaking, the accomplishments that we are highlighting have been the result of the hard work of many of the individuals in this room, individuals that work for our municipality, individuals that work on the boards, committees, and commissions, individuals that work in the local nonprofits. So I just want to make sure this is me highlighting the work that others have done. So we asked the town's engineering and infrastructure and operations, whatever your new title is, of the department, how much bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure improvements have been made since the Climate Action Plan was adopted, and how much is planned and coming in the next 2 years, and combined the completed and upcoming infrastructure upgrades will result in 18,700 feet or 3.5 miles. And when the upcoming projects are complete, another 22,200 feet or 4.2 miles of roadways, pathways will have been improved to make it easier to bike and walk and safer to bike and walk. A few other accomplishments and things that are pending. Princeton will have its second dedicated bike lane and first buffered bike lane. The town has ordered and waiting for delivery of electric shuttles to be used for its Princeton Uni Transit Service, formerly known as the Freebie. And the university is planning to add off-road cycle track and on-road two-way cycle track on Washington Road, which if any of you have ridden your bike around town and tried to get to the canal or to the shopping centers on Route 1, this will make getting to and from downhill and uphill a lot easier and safer. So this is ridership data of the Princeton Uni, or formerly known as the Freebie. And you can see that it is rebounding from the pandemic. It was not operating during the pandemic, but since it's been back in operation, the ridership has been increasing. And we hope once they're electric shuttles that people will be even more inspired to take the Princeton Uni. There was also in the plan a key performance indicator, KPI, that the town should have 12 public charging stations by 2025, and we can say that that has been done. There are 20 public charging stations throughout the town. There are 8 ports at 400 Witherspoon. There are 2 ports at the Spring Street Garage. There's charging stations in the private garages on Chambers and Hullfish. PFARS has public charging station, and the shopping center has public charging stations. There was also an action in the plan to require all new development to provide EV charging infrastructure in appropriate locations, and thankfully the state took care of that for us. So in 2021, the state enacted the ordinance that requires all new development projects to have make-ready or charging stations installed based on that chart there. So how is our transition to electric vehicles going? So this is data from the New Jersey DEP. And here's how Princeton ranks in terms of the number or percentage of EVs of registered vehicles. So we are third in the state in terms of percentage of EVs.
How do you know how many people have?
When it's based on vehicle registration, and so the registration, you have to provide a VIN number, and that would be identified with whether or not that's an electric vehicle. So, I'd like to think maybe Sustainable Princeton can take some credit from having our e-commuter fest for the past few years and educating people about EVs, but we can't prove that. Okay. Other key accomplishments. So I may have to rely on some of the planners and engineers in the room to help me explain why this is a big deal, why adopting the NACTO topology in the master plan is a big deal. And if David or Deanna, you want to kind of, in a nutshell, explain, or Lori Harmon from the PVAC, this sets a vision of how any streetscape should prioritize people that walk or bike over single occupancy vehicles. I have that right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. The town also adopted a green building and sustainability element in the community master plan. That was an effort from the Environmental Commission and the Planning Board to get included into the community master plan. Princeton was selected as one of the first New Jersey DEP destination electric towns. So if you go to the website for DEP Destination Electric, you'll see Princeton as one of the featured communities. And as I mentioned, we host an annual EV Ride and Drive event every year. So next section in our climate action plan is the natural resources. And the vision for these actions are so that Princeton community members benefit from a healthy and resilient ecosystem. So what are some of the key progress areas some of the key progress that has happened? The town and its arborist and the Shade Tree Commission have completed the town's first street tree inventory, which has counted about 17,000 street trees that are in the public right of way. And this is just a start. And they used a tool called DV Tree Keeper, which also provides calculations of what that means in terms of carbon dioxide uptake and stormwater mitigation and air pollution removal. Princeton is one of not every municipality in the New Jersey has a full-time arborist, so the town is very fortunate to have a full-time arborist and also an open space manager. That was an action in the plan, a recommendation at open space manager, and so the town now has a full-time open space manager.
Today, that we just hired a new open space manager.
You just hired a new one, and are they in the audience today? No, okay. So also key accomplishments in natural resources is the preservation of the Landwood Tract and 153 acres of the Landwood private flying woods. So I think there's some folks in the room here today that played a role in helping to make that happen. And also the town's updated master plan includes recommendations for the town to establish a greenway which will connect create connective corridors from our open spaces around town and make accessing this greenway easier no matter where you live in town. And no conversation or presentation about land stewardship should happen without acknowledging all of the organizations and groups and individuals in this town. I think we have captured everyone here, and these groups are professionals and volunteers who spend many hours and many gallons of sweat in our natural and open spaces, removing invasives and planting natives. They are doing a Herculean task of trying to combat invasive species and to reforest and renaturalize and to be good stewards of our open spaces. So I really want to make sure that we as a community understand and give the recognition to these groups that they deserve for the amount of work that they do in our town. The Climate Action Plan also included an action to reduce emissions from public and private lawn maintenance equipment. One of the focus areas that Sustainable Princeton has prioritized over the past few years is to work with our landscaping community, including our Spanish-speaking landscaping community, to connect them with training and resources to help them to transition their business from using gas-powered equipment and to adopt landscaping practices that incorporates green infrastructure, rain gardens, including native plantings. This is a photo from a workshop that we did in partnership with the Watershed Institute last fall, where we provided all in Spanish training to landscaping owners and crew members. We had a member of municipal staff there to explain what the rules and green infrastructure rules are in the town. We're going to be hosting another one this spring, an on-site workshop in town at a rain garden, and then a second classroom workshop at the Watershed, again all in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking landscaping community. Okay, I'm going to turn it over now to Alana Burke, our Communications and Outreach Manager, who's going to talk about our second to last section of our Climate Action Plan.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Christine. So I have the pleasure of getting to talk about everyone's favorite topic, the trash. So while we can't recycle our way out of climate change, our community vision is that our community members are aware of the carbon emissions of the resources that they use. So I want to start by taking a look at a tool that's incredibly useful for talking about the preference in the ways that we reduce and manage waste. This is called the hierarchy of waste. And the most important thing is that the most sustainable thing that we can do to our waste is to prevent making it. So I want to also highlight some of the community partners that are helping our town meet this goal. So first and foremost, Experience Princeton is helping our town promote experiences over things through creative placemaking and promotions. The Food Insecurity Task Force is helping us feed people, not landfills, by giving good food that would have otherwise been thrown away to those who are hungry. And we have 19 businesses in town who are registered in our state's Sustainable Business Registry, so they're taking sustainable practices into their business practices. And of course, our town hosts 2 times a year a Shred Fest that helps our residents dispose of difficult to recycle items. And speaking of the town, this past year, a municipality implemented a cart-based system for waste and a bulk waste reservation system for those large items that you need to dispose of. And look at the graph. It's working. This system has helped us reduce our waste significantly. In 2023, we threw away 400 tons less waste than in 2022 and 1,000 tons less than in 2021. That is an incredible achievement. I'm like high fives all around. That is awesome. So also this past year, the municipality rolled out its pilot of the first food scrap drop-off program, which was made completely free to residents to sign up for. And since this program rolled out last October, over 5 tons of food scraps have been diverted from the landfill, which is reducing emissions by 2.7, oh goodness, what is this, carbon equivalents carbon dioxide equivalents, I get that correctly. So that includes your carbon dioxide and your methane and all the other nasty greenhouse gases that are causing problem. So what does this mean? That this is the equivalent to the carbon sequestration of 45 tree seedlings grown over 10 years. That is huge. Good job, y'all. All right, back to you, Christine, for resiliency.
Thank you. Okay, so the last section of the Climate Action Plan has actions that will help our community members be prepared for the impacts of climate change. So one of the things that was accomplished when the town updated its master plan was that it added a climate change related hazard vulnerability assessment to the master plan. This is now required of all municipalities in New Jersey. And this section of the master plan identifies vulnerable infrastructure and helps to identify what the impacts of climate change is going to be in our community so that we can better plan for it. The town is currently undertaking a mapping of the stormwater system, and they have gathered quite a lot of data of the existing stormwater infrastructure and is continuing to add more data to it. And this is very, very important. I think we all understand that climate change is already upon us. We are experiencing more flooding and more intense flooding, and our stormwater system needs to be able to handle all of this additional stormwater. So the infrastructure that we have not only needs to be capable of handling all of this additional stormwater, it needs to be able to do it in a way that is more natural, that improves the local water quality, that reduces erosion and minimizes the impact on our waterways. And so you can't really manage what you don't measure or you don't have a clear understanding of where that infrastructure is. So a critical first step of having a resilient stormwater system is to map what currently exists, and then you can devise upon that a plan to improve it and know where you need to put your resources to making that stormwater system more resilient. The town has also completed phase 1 of a stormwater utility feasibility study. So these are all kind of layered steps. You start with the mapping, then you want to come up with a mitigation plan, and then you need a mechanism by which you can fund the upgrades to the infrastructure. And a stormwater utility is one tool that municipalities have the authority to do in order to fund how you're going to manage that system. So town will be embarking upon phase 2 of that feasibility study. The town has also enacted stringent stormwater management rules for all new developments with increased impervious coverage. So any new development has to meet higher standards, and they have to use green infrastructure techniques over gray infrastructure techniques. The town has also added a local health outreach coordinator, which is responsible for reaching out to our vulnerable community members. So as we are experiencing extreme weather events or the other health impacts from a changing climate, the town has a position of someone who is establishing relationships with our vulnerable community members so that the town can get in touch with them with information about how to stay safe and how to protect themselves from the climate change hazards. And this one is kind of bare and is very, very unsexy. And stay with me while I try to explain how this is important. So not only do we have pipes under the ground that take our stormwater to away, we have pipes in our homes and our buildings that take what goes down our drains and our sinks and our toilets, and it sends it to be treated. And those pipes that run under our ground need to be resilient. Right now, the town is upgrading the sanitary pump stations because there are pumps located around town that make sure that What goes down our drains gets to the sewage treatment facility to be treated, and they need to operate when there is flooding. So they need to be able to be powered and above the flood. So 8 pump stations are going to be upgraded so that they can operate in extreme weather events or extreme precipitation events. There is also cracks in those pipes, and a lot of storm water gets into them, which means our sewage treatment facility is processing and treating volumes that they do not need to, which we expend energy to do. And so by fixing or improving and patching up and plugging up our sanitary sewer system, we are becoming more resilient to climate change, and we're reducing our emissions because the treatment facility is only going to have to treat absolutely what it needs to, and it allows us to grow in a way that you can add capacity. You don't have to build more capacity because you're just managing and treating the volumes that you need to. I see some noddings of heads from the engineers that get that right. Okay. So what's next? Well, here's how we're doing. We track the status of the actions by whether or not they were started. Some are ongoing, things we need to continuously do, things that we haven't started yet, things that are completed, things that are one and done, like hiring an open space manager, adding a green building and sustainability element. Once you do that, it's done. So here's the total of where we are in each section of the 85 actions for our plan. So our team has been looking at other climate action plans, newer ones that communities are adopting and following sort of like what the trends are. And we've identified a few things that we think we may want to incorporate when we update our plan, or things that we should consider as we're enacting the plan. The plan had a number of key performance indicators that at the time the plan was released, we didn't know what that indicator was, and we need to figure out what they are. So we need to reevaluate our KPIs and establish them where we don't have any. When we update the plan in 2028, we will probably need to revise our mission goals, and we should do so based on what the latest science says we need to do in terms of reducing emissions by when. There are many climate action plans, and communities are becoming increasingly aware and prioritizing the relationship of environmental justice and climate. And so you may want to consider and consider an environmental justice working group so we can better understand what the impacts are of climate change to our community, to our environmental justice communities. And consider adding a per capita emissions goal. So the goal of 80% by 2050 is one way of establishing a goal, but we should also consider a per capita. And that really helps us understand what our individual consumption habits mean in terms of not just the emissions from within Princeton, but the full life cycle of the emissions from the products and the goods and the services that we all consume. So we should consider adding a per capita emission goal. So we're going to, before we get into a Q&A, I just want to sort of set the Q&A conversation in some context. I think we need to think about what kind of a community we want to be and what's the legacy we want to leave for Princeton in 2050. I want us to think about who will live here, how welcome they are here. What values do we uphold? Did we uphold our values of being a progressive community that is open to people no matter what income or where you come from or who you love? What example do we set for the generations that are going to dwell here in Princeton after we are gone? And what will we look like? And I think it's very important that we understand when we developed this plan in 2019, we did not have the global tension, regional tension, local tension that we have now. We have multiple crises, not just a climate crisis. We have a racial justice crisis. We have a housing crisis. How do we as a community work together to solve these crises in a way that builds community rather than pull us apart and create division? That's the question I have that I hope you all think about a little deeply. So we surely missed things, and we will be publishing a more detailed report. So if we missed something that the town has done, your organization has done to help us achieve the goals, please let us know. We want to make sure it gets incorporated. How do you want to get involved? We have some leafs in the back for you to leave a comment about what did we miss, how do you want to get involved, and what are your hopes? And just make sure before you all leave tonight to know that we have some upcoming events. There's a flyer in the back that will give you more details. Okay, so we're going to move into our Q&A. And Alana is going to check to see if we got any questions that came in through our email.
Just as you're waiting to raise your hand, I want to thank Sustainable Princeton for such a great presentation and all the hard work that you and your partners have been doing. Thanks.
Yep. Okay, somebody do.
Okay, speak right.
Thanks. I always like to get things started with the questions. So with the hardening of our sewer pump stations, which you talked about, and even with that last slide where you talked about what will the community look like, I don't think that those were actions that were included in the climate action plan initially. So the question is there a mechanism for updating the climate action plan, not just checking to see how we're doing and have we met, how much of our goals have we met, but have we discovered some new goals that we should have had in the plan in the first place, and those can get added to the plan?
Sure, all right. I think we could. I think maybe process-wise, maybe if those things have already been identified through another plan, maybe they're in the master plan or maybe they're a council priority, we could add an addendum, right? We don't have to wait till 2028 to reconvene working groups and a steering committee to kind of do an overhaul. But that's something we could consider. And the thing I've always said about the plan is a plan can just be, pieces of paper in a binder that sit on a shelf. It's meant to guide, and it's about the process, and it's about, referring to it to inform you in making decisions. If you thought adding an addendum was going to help prioritize those things that we now know we need to do, then I would say do it. If we already know we need to do those things, you need to have them in the plan to get them done. So, yeah. Yeah. Liz, question.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for this presentation and for coming back and tracking this. I think it's so important, and cool that we have Sustainable Princeton. I had a question about one of the very first slides where it shows what the goals are, and it looked like, our goals are to be reducing emissions, and then it looked like our line was actually going in the wrong direction. And I just
Yes.
wanted to, you could reflect a little bit on that, and well, the COVID is the drop.
Yes.
But
Yes.
Going up is the recovery.
Oh, I see. All right. So it's not, all right. We're still like mostly a downward,
We are, yes.
but we're still above the green.
What is very difficult to do is do attribution of the actions that we were doing and attribute it to any of those emissions reductions. That's something else we could try to do, is more of an attributional, yes, that dip was COVID. As Alex was explaining, how we got to that emission inventory is we get utility data of how much electricity and natural gas was consumed from our buildings, and we use Google resource that tracks, transportation. So you can easily track, all right, electricity and natural gas consumption went down in our town, but as Alex said, it might have just moved to another community. So what we want to do is preserve whatever habits we might have changed during COVID, maybe biking more. We want to keep those, or else we'll just trend back up to where we were in 2010. Alana.
Oh, sorry, I gave it to
Yeah.
Heidi.
Oh, Heidi. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, maybe this is what you were just saying that you can't really do, but, understanding which of the actions give us the biggest bang for the buck, right? Because we are in a race. The biggest changes we can make now are so vitally important, because we're, kind of on this collision course. And so I'm just sort of wondering, are those actions identified and sort of prioritized because they will give us the nearest term, largest reductions?
I think Heidi was on our energy working group, so I am going to say the actions that were prioritized in that section were things that were identified that would have the biggest impact. Because the cleanest energy is the energy you do not use. So the more efficient we are with our resources, if we upgrade our existing built environment and have any new built environment be as efficient as possible, then that is one of the most impactful things that we can do. And because you see in the pie chart, transportation emissions are also quite significant. If we can stop using single occupancy vehicles that rely on petroleum, we will also make a big chunk, we'll take a big chunk out of our emissions. So, Alana, a question from the
Yes, I
virtual.
am asking a question.
Speaking the mic.
Is that better?
Close.
Okay. I'm asking a question on behalf of Tom Layden, who asked, why don't Princeton schools have solar on their buildings? Third-party financing would pay for the system with no payments from taxpayers, only utility bill savings for the Princeton schools. Thanks.
Okay, in the audience, we have Jenny Legner, who is a program manager that works with the schools to help them with their sustainability initiatives, and I think she can help answer that question.
So thank you. My understanding from speaking to the administration and the facilities people at the Princeton Public Schools is that they are waiting to finish repairing and replacing the roofs at all the schools. They started that last summer. It'll continue this summer. They can only do that work in the summers, and I believe by next summer they will have finished. And at that point, the plan is we're going up there and hammering the panels in ourselves. We have to.
Thanks, Christine. Wonderful to hear all this. What, I may have missed it in the beginning, but how does the university fit into the whole?
That's a good question. So, yes, so in the emissions, their emissions from their buildings would be counted in the commercial, and they, I think, are about half of it. I can't remember off the top of my head. They are a big chunk of the commercial emissions. They have a plan of getting to zero emissions by 2046. And I know you've probably all seen some of the geo exchange projects they're doing around town and the solar installations that they've been doing. I know that they're doing an update to their sustainability plan and going to be releasing it soon. So once they release that, we'll be able to see how they're doing towards their goal of getting to zero by 2046. But there's a lot we can learn from how they're going about doing it. I'm waiting to get a tour of the Tiger GeoExchange plant once they're offering it. And for those who don't know, Randy Weintraub does a lot of climate change education with his students at Prisms, and is definitely a climate champion in our community.
Yeah, they are going to be opening tours at the Geo Exchange thing soon, so everyone can see it.
And I know that they have also done things by limiting the amount of people that can park there, people who work there. And they have a transportation demand management program, which means they provide incentives for their employees to be able to get to work without needing to hop in a car. Yes.
Right. So I spoke with Alana about this some time ago. You kind of covered pedestrian access, increasing accessibility, and for bicyclists as well. But I didn't really hear anything about pedestrian safety as much. So I know that there's the PBAC. I was just wondering what other organizations are there that are kind of pushing for pedestrian safety, because I think in 2023, New Jersey had like the highest number of PVCs, pedestrian vehicle collisions in like the country, one of the highest. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'll ask Lori or David to address that. I don't know, or Deanna, I don't know any other organizations, but they can share like some of the Vision Zero and other safety initiatives in town.
Princeton has a very robust program in our engineering and infrastructure operations department, where we are constantly working with the police department to analyze the crash trends in town, especially with bike and pedestrian crashes. The town also has a complete streets policy as well as a Vision Zero policy. And we will be looking at doing more promotion towards that in this coming year, as well as updating our complete streets policy for a green streets policy as well. So it's kind of built into our programming whenever we are aware of crashes that are occurring, so that we can stem the trend or any spike that's occurring as quickly as we can.
Could you define what complete streets means?
Sure. Complete streets is it's a design philosophy to that all roadways, where possible, should accommodate all users. It's not always possible that all users can use the same facilities, but to prioritize bike and pedestrian usage as well as transit.
There's also there's a Greater Mercer Transportation Management Authority, and Lisa, are there any other organizations that work in transit that this gentleman might want to get connected with?
One of the other statewide organizations is the Northeast Transportation Center that's housed within the Boston School for Planning and Public Health. They hold a bi-monthly webinar / meeting that is available to everyone. One of the afterwards, I can get you the details of the Bike Ped Advisory Council, I think it's called, where it's open to everyone to various topics and questions and support.
Sure.
Thank you. Actually, I have a question or comment. about this chart, right? So based on what you find out, there are majority of saving can come from the potential building type of infrastructure. Now, based on your the master plan that we see in Princeton Township, like more than half of the building are built actually before 1960. More than half of it. And according to this chart, what we are thinking right now is actually have time been thinking about some kind of incentive program to help homeowner or builder to improve the energy saving by increasing the building standard. Do we have any type of incentive to do that? Because actually my son in Princeton High School, he did the research himself. He increased all the insulation with all the envelope for the building. If we increase that, his research find out that the energy consumption can reduce up to 80%. And I was surprised to see the number. Based on what we heard today, actually, I think this is the right direction. If Tom as a council, if they can come up with some kind of a property tax incentive for homeowners like myself, but invest in the building structure, and the property tax can give us some incentive. I think that's an easy way, and it's a shortcut we can in this opportunity to improve our 60% of the residential house, our house. Right?
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you are passionate about air sealing insulation, helping us reach our climate action goals. It's not something everybody, thinks is how we're going to get there. There are existing state and federal incentives. The Inflation Reduction Act, which was passed not too long ago, is considered one of the most significant pieces of climate legislation. So there is a number of consumer incentives in that to help offset the cost of making your home more efficient and do air sealing and insulation. There are state programs as well, and Alex can talk a little bit more with you afterwards about the state incentives. There's also one way that we can improve the efficiency of new construction is to advocate at the state level to adopt stricter energy efficiency codes. So I'm going to Heidi Fichtenbaum right there, probably someone who knows quite a bit about how do we, what can we do to get the state, because it's the state that sets the energy efficiency standards for local municipalities. Municipalities can't enact stricter standards. There is some legislation making its way through the state for a program called CPACE, which is that's a commercial type of program that offers a way for commercial properties to install and upgrade their facilities to be more efficient and to get a basically it's called PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy. It's another tool. Some states have residential PACE programs, but I don't think there's one and it works in New Jersey. But there are state and federal incentives already exist that can be very lucrative. Wendy? And Wendy, after you ask your question, would you share with the audience the work that Propulse has been doing and how many native trees, shrubs, and herbaceous plants you are going to be planting in Mountain Lakes?
Well, that's kind of sneakily built into my question. So I think one of the goals in the plan was is expressed as preserving our tree canopy, and of course, trees, provide shade that reduces energy use. But as was also represented when you talked about preserving the 153-acre forested property, those big old trees are sequestering carbon. But another way that we, Friends of Princeton Open Space, can help and are helping is, as you say, by forest restoration work, by planting trees at Mountain Lakes Preserve. It's thousands. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact number. But I think that and also the project where we're partnering with the municipality should definitely be captured as an accomplishment if it isn't already in the
Yes.
report. Because that project, if people don't know about it, it actually has the word climate in its name. It's a natural climate solutions project at Community Park North to restore the forest there. So, yeah.
Yes, we do have that in the,
Excellent.
we just didn't put it in the slide. So for those who don't know, Wendy is the executive director of Friends of Princeton Open Space, and
No, I'm just the board.
she's just the board president. Okay, not just. And has anyone volunteered to do any stewardship work at Phobos or Herringtown Woods or Marquand Park or anywhere else in town? Oh, great. If you have not, you should. It is very rewarding work to go and help remove invasives and plant more natives in our open space. Any other questions? Lois.
Sorry, if you could wait for the mic because it's yellow.
So many things in my mouth. But I'm curious as to how effective the composting program has been working.
So with the 2 drop-off locations, which I think there's almost 200 people who have signed up to participate since November. So this includes November, December, January, since January 26th was the last bit of data. 5 tons of food scraps have been diverted from the landfill and sent to Trenton Renewables. So that's about 2.7 metric tons of CO2e. And the town is, hoping to try to expand this. There are some small micro haulers that are doing business in Princeton, and we don't have any data from them. But you may drive around town and you see like a 5-gallon bucket out at the end of someone's driveway. It might say unwaste. It might say 1 compost can. So there are quite a number. There are a few micro haulers that are. You can subscribe and they'll pick up either weekly or every other week food scraps, and they take them to local facilities. I think they take them to some local farms where they turn into compost, but we don't have any data about how much they're collecting right now. Does that answer your question?
So, sort of.
Okay.
I think there's lots of room for growth in this area. And I think the current program, which I think is somewhat of a pilot, is still underutilized. And I'm wondering how it will be rolled out so that more people in the town can take it.
Yeah, so Lois said, she thinks that there's a lot of potential for growth, and I agree. One way is I think what the town learned before when it had its residential curbside program is that you need to ensure that what people put in there stays just only put in there what can go in there. Because if you start putting things in there that the facility is going to reject, you risk the success of the program and you risk being able to expand and grow. One of the other limiting factors for growing a program is the hauling costs. That is a big part of the cost of any waste or food scrap or recycling service in a town. It's the cost for the truck to come and take it somewhere. And the hauling costs are about double the tipping fee. So for food scraps. So the tipping fee at Trenton Renewables is $65 a ton compared to $120 to send it to the landfill. But the hauling costs are, you have to think the trucks, they have to send another truck on another route. They have to pay the crew for another shift. So you don't get real efficiencies in the hauling when you add another route or another type of service. So one of the things that I think would really help is if the county tried to help solve that like they do for recycling. Almost every town in Mercer County utilizes a shared service agreement with the county, and they are the ones that contract for the hauling for the recycling, and that helps spread, reduce some of the costs. I think one other way, when the town started with this pilot, you want to just start small, get the early adopters and those who are invested in this doing everything right, and then grow it incrementally so you don't run into a situation where you have to take a step back because what people are putting in there starts getting contaminated and they start rejecting loads. So it's kind of incremental growth. I hope that answers your question. Another thing would help is to distribute these drop-off locations in easier or more accessible places around town. Okay. Yes.
Just along those same lines, how about encouraging people to compost on their property?
Absolutely.
And maybe, I remember that there were, I think they had subsidized grain barrels that the town provided at one point.
Yep.
Maybe we could subsidize or, help with the cost of composting bins, but you don't really need a very big bin if it's working right, or a very large scale.
Absolutely. For those who couldn't hear, one of the least expensive, easiest options is to compost in your backyard, food scraps, and also your leaves and other types of brush. And yes, the town did a Shred Fest last year did offer the discounted rain barrels and discounted backyard composting. So I think, I see Deanna nodding her head, something certainly the town can look at doing again at a next Shred Fest. Okay, well, it looks like there are no questions, but please stay and talk to members of our team. Be sure to make note on your calendars of the upcoming events that we have. And thank you to everyone who attended virtually and everyone who came out in person tonight. Thank you. Thank you.